The Nintendo 64, without question, has to be the most influential thing in local multiplayer game history, right? When you talk about multiplayer in video games nowadays, things that come to mind are things like Fortnite, GTA Online, and it's all these things where we are in one location playing with people around the world. But there came a point in time where we played video games together. It's like this magical thing that you could plug in a Nintendo 64 with 4 different controller ports, and you can play and battle against your friends with games like Super Smash Bros., Goldeneye, Super Mario Kart, way back in the Super Nintendo with 2-player. You could talk about the arcades with things like The Simpsons, the X-Men arcade game. And we thought, why not have this just super nostalgic piece talking about some of our favorite and the evolution of local multiplayer games on another exciting episode of A Cast of the Past, with a new one available every single Sunday with yours truly, Juan from Puerto Rico, joining me for this super nostalgic ride from Boston, Massachusetts. We have Ryan McNulty. Now, Ryan, when you think about local multiplayer games and little Ryan growing up, what is the first game that comes to mind for you?
I think Goldeneye has to be the one that comes to mind because it really was the biggest thing for its time. I think, the late 90s, Goldeneye, I think it's I forget who awarded it, but I think Goldeneye won Game of the Year like 2 years in a row by some publication. It was a big deal. I mean, it's one of those games, you go back and play it now, and it's pretty rough around the edges, but it really was kind of front and center for the first-person shooter genre and really emphasizing multiplayer at a console level. Of course, there were plenty of PC games that were taking advantage of multiplayer FPS before this, but when you talk about FPS games on a console, it's funny to think that the N64 was really the first console that really is where it took off before, of course, things like Halo really kind of took the ball and ran with it. But GoldenEye always comes to mind. I was never particularly good at it, but I do remember hanging out in friends' basements who had a setup with 4 controllers, and everyone, taking turns. Whoever did the worst would rotate in, someone else would rotate in. But even though I sucked, there was a lot of good memories.
I think that's the best thing, that even if you didn't have the Nintendo 64, and we're going to be talking about other consoles, but to me, same thing, which is that maybe you did have a Nintendo 64, but I mean, having 4 controllers was pretty damn expensive, right? So to me, I only had the one. No friend ever really brought one over to my house, so that may be sad. But I had the friend that had GoldenEye, Smash, and No Mercy. And I think that, to me, that was the trifecta. That was the trilogy. If you went to a friend's house and they had a Nintendo 64 and 4 controllers, you knew stuff was about to happen, right?
Oh, yeah, of course. I mean, even Conker's Bad Fur Day, not a ton of people played a lot of the multiplayer there. I think it kind of came out towards the end of the N64 lifespan, but that had some amazing multiplayer on it that a friend and I used to play, and No Mercy, a lot of fun memories there. Sometimes we would just literally play as the Dudley Boys and just do a handicap match and just do a 3D, just try to do 3Ds over and over again to people, trying to get them through a table. But yeah, Conker's Bad Fur Day had some insane multiplayer. And the great thing about that one was you could go beyond 4 people in the multiplayer.
Really? How so?
Not necessarily, because you could put AI in. So they let you put,
okay.
I forget what the maximum amount, maybe it was 8 or something. So we would just do us playing as the squirrels, and because you had squirrels versus teddies in like this World War II theme, and we'd do 2 squirrels versus like 6 teddies, and these are evil teddy bears. And they were we put them on like Einstein difficulty, so they were like sniping us like crazy, but they made it super intense, and it was a ton of fun.
I think it's kind of interesting to look back at this topic because, we always talk about the fact that we grew up playing games in the 90s and the 2000s, and the obvious stuff is just like you talk about, your Super Mario World and all that, but this topic of local multiplayer games is like a niche topic within nostalgia, because when we decided to work on this episode, like I started to think for myself, what was like the first time that I played a game with somebody else? Because to me, and I think we're all guilty of this, maybe you had a big brother that was playing a game and then you had the second controller, except you weren't actually doing anything, but they made you think like you were. I think we were all victims of that. What's like the first multiplayer video game that you actually think about? Not just like your favorite, but just like that first experience with playing a game either against or with somebody else. Because I can't really think of that. Like maybe on the NES, what would that be? On the NES,
I mean, I can think of Super Mario World, not Super Mario World, but Super Mario Brothers. There was the two-player functionality,
Right.
but you weren't necessarily playing at the same time. And then, I do think of Donkey Kong Country. And again, there was a couple different options for multiplayer there where you would either verse each other, where you would play as Donkey Kong and Diddy, and then they would play. And it was kind of annoying because you would swap between two. I think whenever you died, the other person went. So it could be a while before you played again. But then you could also do a version where one person plays as Diddy, the other person plays as Donkey Kong, and no one ever wanted to play as Donkey Kong. It was just one of those things. But those are some of the early ones. And of course, Zombies Ate My Neighbors, which is a fantastic game, but is so difficult, and I've never beaten it to this day. But that was a great one where, two people on screen could play together at the exact same time.
I think that may be the first multiplayer game that I really thought of and went like, wow, look at the potential of this game, because you bring up Donkey Kong Country, and as good as that is, it's kind of like not as good as just playing it by yourself, because to me, I was like, oh, so if I'm doing bad, I get punished because I play less and the other person plays more. But with something like Zombies Ate My Neighbors, we actually tried to work together. And that in itself was something I wasn't really used to, because when you think about cooperative games, and this really ties in with multiplayer games, I think the concept of beat 'em ups is maybe the main thing, right? You think about the arcades with, like I mentioned, The Simpsons, X-Men. When you think about those games, which one did you really love to play growing up?
Beat 'em up games, oh, that was Turtles in Time for sure. When I think about growing up, for the Super Nintendo, that was the game to play. I don't think even on the Super Nintendo itself, I don't think I ever necessarily even beat the game until maybe they came out with that HD re-release of Turtles in Time. But I really did love that game a lot.
No, that was incredible. And I think that game, I played a lot of these games on the Super Nintendo, but then we know that sometimes the arcade was better. When you think about this topic of local multiplayer games, I do think you have to sort of divide it between like arcade and console, because arcade it was a lot better, right? You had just like you put in the quarters, you play that. Did you love that? Like just going to a place like Chuck E. Cheese or Time Out or something and just playing with a random stranger? Or did you prefer to maybe play with somebody that you knew at home?
Usually I would play with, for the arcade environments, I didn't go to a ton of different arcades growing up. When I used to go up for vacations in New Hampshire, there was a whole strip at a place called Ware's Beach where they have a bunch of arcades. They're still there to this day. I went there a couple of years ago.
Oh, nice.
And obviously they've upgraded a lot of the arcades, but they still have some old school ones too. But there also used to be a place called Strike One near me growing up that was essentially like all the kids, when you're in elementary school, all the kids would like have their birthday party there. That was like the place to have, because they had some areas where you could do like, there was the batting cages and other kind of sports things to do. But then they also had this arcade area where it's all these arcade machines, but they don't need to use quarters. Like you just got a free reign over these arcade machines, which was awesome. So that was a lot of fun. But when it comes to standard arcade machines, I wasn't a fan of having to keep popping in quarters to beat a game, because I never had enough quarters to make it through a game.
That was the whole thing, man. That was the whole thing.
Any beat 'em up game where you can hurt each other those were just there to steal your quarters, and it was some BS.
No, man, I'm trying to think of when did I really fall in love with local multiplayer games? And even though we talked about the arcade, Super Nintendo, and the PlayStation 1, you could play co-op and you could play against each other. It had things like the multi-tab for 4-player support. The Nintendo 64, without question, has to be the most influential thing in local multiplayer game history, right? It may be controversial for some people that maybe play games in the 80s and the early 90s, and it's like, oh no, that's a 3D generation. But the 4 ports, the fact that Nintendo, the main company, they themselves made games like Smash and all of that. It's like they knew going in, they wanted to be the party machine. Did you like that party machine, Ryan?
Oh, of course. Yeah. I mean, N64, that was kind of, that was really our system of our childhood, right? Because that's when we were of the age where we could start to actually get good, if you will.
Yeah, yeah.
And yeah, there was a lot of games, of course, Mario Kart. How can we forget that? I mean, it's still, an important game to this day that is very much the king of local multiplayer. Because local multiplayer, we're talking about it as if it's this bygone thing, but really, even though online multiplayer is obviously the most popular form of multiplayer today, there is still a very good amount of local multiplayer games that are released, and they may not, you might think, just kind of off the top of your head, oh, there's not that many, but when you actually kind of look at it, there's a lot more than you might think.
I think that's the case now, but there was definitely a shift between like the PS3 360 generation, where a lot of games that were used to like, you brought up Goldeneye, and Goldeneye, the whole concept, even though it ran like crap, people, the Goldeneye, like 4-screen, that thing ran at like at 10 frames per second, and it was ugly AF. But that's what we had, right? But with the PS3 360 generation, a lot of games came out, even racing games. And I think racing games, it's like a mandatory thing to have at least a 2-player split screen. Some of them said like, hey, guess what? If you want to play with your friend, you got to go to your house, buy yourself a copy of the game and do that. And yeah, that was very much from a technological standpoint, right? These games were graphically a lot more detailed. It wasn't like your Mario Kart 64s, right? Where it was a combination of 3D and sprites, and it looked pseudo 3D sometimes. But I think that as time went on, that magic, and there is definitely that shift from the moment that you had a dial-up or Ethernet. Some people said, why go to Ryan's house? Why do that? Like, did you ever feel that transition of like, it's maybe a thing that is lost? It is now optional, right? There are some games that do actually still only have a local option, maybe because it's easier to develop. But do you think that eventually that local multiplayer became more of a chore or something that people thought was antiquated?
I think for some people it was, and they much preferred online, and I totally understand that. For me, local multiplayer has never died. I've always, friends, when we play, like a lot of my friends who play video games, they don't really play online games. None of my friends do. So it's more of a thing of when we all get together and we play video games, we play games that are local multiplayer. So, there's a lot of WWE wrestling games. I remember WWE All-Stars was a big one when I was in college. Yeah, when I was in college, that was a hit. Like, people who didn't even live at our dorm, when they would come over, they would all want to play. So it was that was a big game for us. Castle Crashers, when that came out, and that came out in like 2008. So around when that came out, that was an awesome local multiplayer game that I've played with friends. And even recently, Overcooked, my girlfriend bought. And that game is just nothing but anxiety for me, but it is a good multiplayer local game. So that's really how my friends and I game, is through either playing a single player game and taking turns sometimes, or doing local multiplayer games. Because even sort of recent games on Xbox and PS3, Battlefront 2, I think, for Star Wars Battlefront, that has a local multiplayer option. So that's my preferred way of gaming, and so is with my group of friends. I think if I had friends who are more into online gaming, I would probably do that more, but that we're all kind of old school local multiplayer fans.
I think for me, the best combination now is when you have a hybrid of both. Something like Mario Kart 8. I love the fact that you can actually go online. Like say you and I were in person, you and I can both go online and play with groups of other people online. So it becomes like this battle of, hey, the people in Juan's house, the people in Keith's house, right? And it's like a really healthy combination. It becomes like super competitive, and I love that combination. I've actually done a couple of streams, and I think that that sense of community can really become a beautiful thing. I think another game is something like Streets of Rage 4, right? That came out this year, and it's super nostalgic, and I love the fact that you can't play online, even though you can't play with 3 players. You can only do 2 players, but you can do 4 local, and that kind of sucks. I think that the biggest challenge as time goes on is I feel like we got the best of both worlds because we grew up, even though we're 30, you're 31 now, Ryan? I forgot.
31,
Damn, you're old, Ryan. What the hell is wrong with you? By the way, people, we totally forgot Ryan's birthday, as of this recording, was last week. So send him a shout out at the Ryan McNulty on Twitter. He's going to love all of that. He's going to love all of that, right?
Oh, yeah, of course.
Of course, man. But when you talk about all of this, I think that you got to bring up the fact that we played 8-bit, 16-bit games. We played local games. We saw the transition to 3D. I've seen people online say, especially, I'm going to sound old, but like the Fortnite generation, right? The generation that grew up, and that was already established. Like, that is the thing. GTA 5 online and all of that stuff. I've seen comments of people saying just like, why would I play this other thing when I have this massively multiplayer game or I can do the battle royales and all of that? If you have to sit down one of these people and just say like, play this damn local multiplayer game so you can see how beautiful and awesome they are, which of these games from the past do you think are still without question worth playing and are among your favorites?
That is difficult. Because I'm trying to think of a local multiplayer game that has aged beautifully, because I would not say, I would not recommend Goldeneye. I'm sorry, because it is not aged well. And then, you might say, oh, Mario Kart 64, but in all honesty, as enjoyable as Mario Kart 64 is, I know that's just the power of nostalgia, right? Go play Mario Kart 8. It runs like a dream, it plays beautifully. I wouldn't say that, Mario Kart 64 is really better than it. So I really don't have an answer off the top of my head where I can say, oh, maybe Zombies Ate My Neighbors, because, that's a game that I think is pretty unique. There's plenty of co-op games, but I don't think there's any game quite like Zombies Ate My Neighbors. So that might be one I recommend, and it's very challenging too.
Oh yeah.
So that would probably be my go-to, because I think some of the other ones, a lot of modern games have done the local multiplayer a little bit smoother. So that would be one to say, here's kind of the magic of a previous era.
For me, one game that I think people always bring up, it's never been one of my favorites, but it is the Bomberman games. Like, those games are meant, kind of like Overcooked. Overcooked, you can't play it online, but the whole experience is yelling out loud. And I think that's like a very underrated part.
Yelling at each other and
like
causing
people just
a breakup.
hating each other. Like, you're the problem. You're the reason the kitchen is on fire, sir. That's happened to you. I would assume.
Yeah. Oh, for sure. I'm usually always the reason. And when the things rotate, something blocks the way, I'm always on the wrong side. And
I think that the awesome thing about that is that you can play those games online. The option is there. But the real meat and potatoes, like the real main event experience, is playing those games in person. Because, you can be on Discord and all of that, but obviously not with the pandemic now, but I played a lot of games like Tetris, for example, is a good example. Tetris, there's like 8,000 versions of Tetris, and I played with the exact same friends online and offline, like locally. And even though we're playing, and even though we are technically doing the same thing, the experience is very different when you're in person. You can actually see that person damn near be about to break the controller. And that in itself, Mr. McNulty, isn't that the essence of local multiplayer? Just how much we can hate each other?
Not always. It's, because when it crosses a certain line, it gets a little uncomfortable. But when you're playing and something funny happens in the game or whatever, like those are the best moments. And it's always way better if you have everyone in person. I mean, I remember for my cousin's birthday party one year, they just set up a huge, like there was probably 15, 20 people there, and they just set up a tournament bracket for Smash Brothers Melee.
Nice.
So like it's just, when you have certain matchups and everyone's cheering people on, like it's just a whole different environment, and you can't really get that. You can't get that same effect online that you can get in person. So there's definitely a certain magic to that.
I think something that I'm clearly not well versed in, but it's like the fighting game community. I think that's sort of been like the evolution of that, where it is like that live experience, and even just like online tournaments. I think it's a lot more competitive, right? Because for some people it's like their job. But I remember, how some people yell at you on Xbox Live, like especially that 360 generation. That was rough, right? So a couple of years ago, I went to a LAN party. It was like an actual tournament for, I want to say like Black Ops 3 or something like that. And I got to witness one of these people behave the same way they usually would online, offline. It got to the point that this entire place, keep in mind there's like 200 people, right? One building, and they're playing a whole bunch of games. People from other games pause their games because this guy was yelling so damn much, like, come on, you freaking suck, come on, people. They actually won. So like that made it worse because it's like, wait.
I bet everyone wanted to see them lose so bad.
But the first thing I thought of is like, is that not like a distraction? I thought it was like wrestling when the manager gets up on the apron. I'm like, man, if I was the other team and the guy is yelling at me, I'd be like, dude, like I'm trying to freaking focus. Of course you're going to be good.
Maybe that was just part of his technique. Throw them off their game.
Maybe it was. So people, we can keep this conversation going. And we actually did on our Discord, acastofthepast.com/Discord. We asked all of you, when talking about this topic of local multiplayer games, which are some of your favorite ones, some of the ones that you played growing up. And here we have Sir Meatwad, fellow retro video game collector, and he wrote a couple, including Ninja Turtles Manhattan Project. Did you play that? Because people always talk about Turtles in Time, but I feel like Manhattan
Project. I did not play
Project,
that one, no.
Ooh, that would be interesting to talk about. Choo Choo Rocket, same question. Did you play this one, Ryan?
I think I played a little bit of it. I don't remember anything about it, though. That was on Dreamcast, I remember the box art, right?
Yeah, that was on the Dreamcast, I believe. Halo, I mean, damn. Okay, we did not talk about that.
I did touch Halo on 1? It briefly, but yeah, Halo 1, local multiplayer, game changer.
Yeah, and even though, once again, like super relevant online, but that local experience is something else. He also brought up Command & Conquer Generals, Goldeneye, NFL Blitz. Man, that was a really good game.
That was a fun game.
I don't know, for a fact, I know nothing about football, but I love playing NFL Blitz. What about you?
Oh, NFL Blitz was a really enjoyable experience. And when I loved playing NFL Blitz, I was not a big football fan. I didn't become a football fan until, not too long ago, maybe like 8 years ago or something. So pre-NFL Blitz era. And this game, they just made, even like you said, people who didn't like football enjoyed this game because they just made it ridiculous, over the top, beat the crap out of each other after every play. And they made a re-release for the PS3 Xbox era, that NFL Blitz remake. Was it as good as the originals? No, but my friends and I loved it so much that we would do you could do co-op online, and there weren't that many people that were playing, but we were pretty damn dominant. I feel like we had to be one of the top group of players for that game. So NFL Blitz is definitely a super fun co-op game that we both forgot to mention, but Sir Meatwad was right on point with that one.
Yeah, and the other one is a Marvel vs. Capcom. No, I got to say right, Marvel vs. Capcom 2, especially on the Dreamcast. I mean, when you talk about fighting games, I think even that in itself is like a whole different category, right? Because I think that brings out the full competitive environment, from Street Fighter 2, Killer Instinct. Which of the fighting games, like, I don't think any of us have ever been like super big fighting game guys, but if you had to pick like one growing up that you at least had some experiences with, which one was it?
Probably Street Fighter 2. I really didn't play that much of it, but I did actually have a friend who had a Street Fighter 2 arcade cabinet in his basement.
Oh, nice.
I think his family is pretty well to do. I have no idea where he got it, but
it was just there.
That was kind of he was pretty famous in school for just having that. It was a pretty big deal. And he whooped everybody's ass. Obviously, because he could practice.
He better whip some ass.
Yeah, he just destroyed anyone who challenged him.
So Meatwad also brought up Smash Brothers, but then talking about now Madross, also from the Discord, he brought up a large variety of games. He wrote, well, depends on the era, but TMNT Twisted Metal Black, that's another really good option that sometimes goes underlooked. Did you know there's actually a multiplayer version of that game that came out officially and most people don't have it?
I didn't know that. In Twisted Metal, that was a game weirdly enough, Twisted Metal 3 was the one I played the most. It was the one I bought. And
I own a copy of that still.
And I have friends who had Twisted Metal 2, but we more often than not played it more as like a single player game. Like we would play through the story mode. I forget if you could do co-op through the story, but I don't think you could in some of the games. But yeah, Twisted Metal, even though it is kind of a multiplayer game, I usually played the single player mode more often than not.
Some of those games don't exactly hold up too well, but it's good. It's good. Bomberman 64 also brings up the PlayStation 1 version. Star Fox 64. I forgot that a Star Fox 64 has any kind of multiplayer.
Yeah, totally.
Seriously, I was just like, really?
Yeah.
Do you even remember that? Because I honestly don't even remember that.
I've never been a big Star Fox guy. I've never even beaten Star Fox 64, to be honest with you.
that could be something we take a look at. Oh man, Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 2. Now that for me, Tony Hawk is my Twisted Metal for you, which is you can technically play with somebody else, but why?
Yeah. No, I was kind of the same way. Like you'd play Graffiti every once in a while with some friends, but the multiplayer mode just seemed so bare bones compared to the single player mode that, again, I'm kind of with you. I didn't play it too often. Although I know in the Tony Hawk's Underground days, we had some fun playing online with that.
Oh, yeah, that was different.
In terms of local multiplayer, yeah, it never was quite as fun as the single player mode.
Yeah, and actually, if you go back to the archives, whether it be on the video version at youtube.com/acastofthepast or on podcast apps, we actually reviewed Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 2, so you can check that out. And then quickly, we have Ace Bunny, who wrote, well, when I was younger, I played a lot of GameCube and PS2. I played stuff like Mario Kart Double Dash and Smash Brothers Melee, but also the great Lord of the Rings, Return of the Kings, which was a really good with co-op. He talks about Return of the King. That game actually had online, too, oddly enough, and I remember playing that a couple of different times. It was a super solid hack and slash game.
I played a couple minutes of that one. I don't have a ton of experience with the Lord of the Rings ones, but I know I've heard a lot of praise with it. I've seen, just browsing through gaming, r/gaming on Reddit. A lot of people have great memories with the Lord of the Rings series. So again, that's something we could always revisit as well.
I've always thought about that, just like in the podcast in general, because it's like a 2-for-1, right?
We could do a movie to game
yeah,
combo.
Because it's like if you play the game, you're kind of doing both. And I forget who it was. Oh yeah, so for those interested, recently I did a stream at my personal Twitch. Shout out to twitch.tv/MrPlayerJuan, and I did have Mr. Keith Hamilton there. And while I was playing the Star Fox, the Star Wars Episode 3 Revenge of the Sith game, some people are going to hate me on that one. He was mentioning that in that case with that video game, a lot of stuff was different from the movie. So even if we talked about, like a video game based on a movie in the future, we could actually point out some differences in all of that, which has nothing to do whatsoever with this topic, but it's definitely something I would love to talk about. And everybody, thank you so much for those on the Discord. As I mentioned, you can join our incredibly growing, awesome, passionate community that just we have a problem on the Discord, Ryan. I feel like Keith brought it up previously.
There's two addictions. There's two addictions going on the Discord: game collecting and eating in donuts. Mostly Juan on the donuts.
No.
It is spread.
I know that usually you should not talk about somebody that cannot defend themselves. I don't give a damn. I'm doing that right now because Keith Hamilton has openly called my ass out about this thing about donuts. And then he goes on the food Discord. And not only does he get donuts, those donuts that he posts there are objectively better looking than the ones I buy. That's bull crap.
Yeah, and he was getting gingerbread lattes and eggnog lattes. Who even has eggnog this time of year? We're in the middle of the damn summer. That's a Christmas drink. I don't know if there's Christmas in July in Canada or whatever. Is everything just too iced over in Canada during December for them to even celebrate Christmas? Who knows? But I don't know. Eggnog. I can't imagine wanting to drink an eggnog latte in 90-degree weather. It doesn't mix,
It sounds weird, but I'm very tempted and curious to try it out. But people, seriously, thank you so much for listening and supporting the podcast. Remember, you can subscribe at youtube.com/acastofthepast. You can leave a 5-star review. We publish podcast clips on Twitter and Facebook, also Acast of the Past. So that way, if you enjoy the podcast, if you want to support us, the best way, Ryan, this costs people nothing. You share some of those clips and join the conversation. We're going to be doing a lot of awesome stuff. I gotta give a tease here. I gotta start the build up because my birthday is coming up in the month of September, and I am forcing these two fine, sexy gentlemen so we can finally talk about one of my favorite movies of all time. And I will leave it at that because I'm not going to take it anymore on another exciting episode of A Cast
to the
Past. So usually we say something witty at the end. Ryan, I got nothing.
You got nothing?
Nope.
Damn, neither do I. We got nothing. We need Keith. Keith.